Mr. Frank, you have the floor.
I do, and unfortunately, Anthony is not here.
Well, then we'll have to just do the national anthem.
We got a phone.
Get out. Oh, please.
So do you want me to embarrass him anyway, or?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I know they do struggle with transportation, but Dad said he would be able to make it, so maybe they're just running a little bit late. So the student I was going to embarrass here tonight is Mr. Anthony Clark, who's a 7th grader at Maryvale.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Would you want to just do the second part first and then hope that they'll get
And
here?
you hope, yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
In that case, I get to embarrass him softly.
Skip to that.
All right, so Ms. Hoffman started with us actually as a student teacher with Mr. Stryker, and this is actually one of my first encounters with Ms. Hoffman was during the spring of 2020 when she was just starting her student teaching. I think she was in the first couple of days, and that is when we had to pack up all the envelopes with the students' materials for 2 weeks and then send them home because of COVID. And we made an announcement, if anyone's available to come out and help down in the office to pack all these things up. You know, we basically have like 2 hours to get it done. She was one of the very first volunteers to come down, and she stayed there until every single envelope was packed. And to me, I was just like, okay, this lady doesn't even know who we are, so she's first time in the building, and she's putting this kind of effort in. And several weeks later, after her student teaching placement ended, which would have ended around mid-May, she actually stayed on board with Mr. Stryker to the end of the year to assist the kids through that virtual learning process. To me, that just exemplified her dedication and professionalism, and not dedication just to Maryvale, but just to students in general. And because of that dedication, that initiative, that drive, that's why we decided to hire her as our 1511 teacher in 6th grade, where she's been doing a phenomenal job. Anytime I ask for teachers to volunteer, whether it's to chaperone an event, to head up or to sit on a committee or to do anything, she's one of the very first people that will shoot me an email and say, I'm in, what can I do? So I love the go-to attitude. She helps run our PBIS program. She lets students throw pies at her face, even the ones that she doesn't know. Again, she chaperones many of our after-school activities. She's a very happy, kind person. Anytime you see her in the hall upstairs, everyone around her is smiling and laughing too. So she obviously has this contagious happiness about her, which is great. And while she's relatively new to our Maryvale family, I'm so glad that she decided to join us and is making a positive impact on our school and our community. So congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for all your hard work.
Thank you very much, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, I appreciate it. Thank you. Send a picture to Mom.
Can you tell us, Sam, we'll do the pledge now?
And over
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You want me to hold off in case he shows, or just?
We are going right into executive session, so is everyone cool if we put it off until after?
President input then.
All right. Is there any resident input? All right, so now we are going into executive session.
Oh, executive session.
Yeah, I'm just seeing if we, because that's what we want to do first. So, is that, we're going to do that? Yeah. All right. Anyone want to make a motion to go to executive session? And we'll do part one afterwards. And the executive session is in regards to employment of a particular person. Second? Second. Second. All in favor? Aye.
No, I didn't bring my dinner. I forgot to It's
It's a ropes course.
Oh, a ropes course.
You find it?
Not right there, but yeah. Right, but it's not. And then you have the bathroom.
It's by-
right back in the regular
It's
bathroom.
right there on the back tower.
Oh, yeah.
Motion to come back into regular session.
Second.
Jen, second, all in favor? Aye. Aye.
Not the town. What about you, Mr. French?
Mr. Frank, you show up? Okay, wonderful. Mr. Frank?
Who's Bill?
Alright, so the timing actually worked out well for us. Anthony, why don't you come up here so everybody sees who you are? As we were talking earlier, I think you've been up here before, is that correct?
Yeah.
How many times have you been up here?
Once.
Once? Is that in the intermediate school? Or primary school? Primary? All right, so Mrs. Jean Greco, she's the one who brought you up last time, right? All right, that's impressive. That means that you're still maintaining this awesome character that you have. So Anthony's now in 7th grade, which is making me feel quite old. Because Anthony was just you feel my pain? Yeah, I hear you. All the teachers that have mentioned your name as far as being deserving of this recognition have a common theme here. And some of those 3 major pieces of those themes are that you're very hardworking, that you're very kind, and what I appreciate, I think most of all, is how helpful you are. Okay, and what I mean by helpful is that if a student needs help, they don't even have to ask for it. Anthony is there to offer them assistance in any way, whether it's academic help, if it's something social or emotional or something else going on, you offer to help teachers. I know one day I was walking down the hall and I picked up some garbage, and you saw me and you picked up a piece of garbage too and you threw it out. I mean, just that kind of spirit is really what we're looking for in all of our students. And I'm just going to kind of say some of the things that teachers have said. Mrs. George says he always participates, puts forth an amazing effort on any given day. Anthony is a leader in the classroom, and although he is a student with a disability, he has proven that is not holding him back. And we have seen a tremendous amount of growth. And your reading has gone from like here to here just in a matter of a year. And that is something that doesn't happen unless you are putting in a ton of effort. And unless you've got a supportive family at home that helps you put in that effort and supports you, right? And the fact that you were able to do this all through this pandemic and make this kind of growth is absolutely amazing to me. Mr. Savone said you're a great kid, polite, kind, positive attitude, diligent, respectful. And all of these things that are coming out in all of these words, and the fact that it's existed all the way through the primary school means that this isn't a Maryvale that created this, right? This is Mr. Clark who created this. You deserve an award. You have done a great job with all of your kids, and I thank you for that, because these are skills and character traits that are going to make you so successful and allow you to do whatever it is that you want to do with your life. So thank you very much, Anthony.
You're welcome.
You're awesome.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's awesome. I'd love to see a 3P. That'd be great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clark.
No problem. All right, moving on to reports, presentations, budget development. Dr. Lemon?
Yes, at our February 7th board meeting, we began a review of the 22-23 budget, where we reviewed the administration and the capital sections of the budget. Tonight, we're going to review the program section of the budget, and these areas and sections are strictly defined by the state. They tell us exactly which budget codes go into which category, and what we basically boil the program section down to is students, the classroom, the buildings, and so forth. So I've broken this section out by object code. It's the second set of digits kind of in the budget code, so that we're gonna review salaries, then we'll talk about contractual codes and materials and supplies, and handle those in groups, rather than by other sections of the budget. It just seems to make more sense. So I'm gonna scroll through this because really the total's at the top of page 2. But overall, we've got a number of salary codes that really are used to pay. Here in the program section, we have our MTA members, whether you're a teacher, social worker, psychologist, guidance counselor, etc. Teacher aides are in a classroom. Our special education office and staff are part of this. Teacher substitutes are part of this. Our IT department is actually part of this. Coaches, co-curricular, all of those salaries, those individuals, those stipends are paid in our program section. And I'll scroll it to the top, just, you can see that all the salaries in this section are up $499,000. Salaries do make up a large portion of our budget, so it's not unusual to have larger amounts there. That is about a 3.1% increase overall on these salary lines. I'd like to point out that one thing we're doing, it's included in this budget, is a need to add a special ed classroom, because we have students placed in outside placements, and we really do want to look at improving that, providing services here. So you might see some increase on a salary line that we hope to ultimately result in savings on outside placement costs and transportation, so to speak. We've also added a 5th grade teaching position to this budget.
And that's to, if I may not, that's to lower class sizes.
Yep.
Class sizes in 5th grade without that position would be at a level which we're not comfortable with.
Correct. So we talk about really doing what we're doing now, next year, is our approach to the budget. There's an argument that could be made, both of these aren't being done now, why are they in next year's budget? That's why I'm bringing them up in particular, because we are, in a way, maintaining class size, even though it's an additional position. But we would never want to add a position without informing you, the public, this is a change, as well as in special ed. And the idea there is truly to save cost compared to outside placement expenses. You scroll through this next section of the budget, I'm just going to do it kind of slowly. This is equipment. All the equipment in our program was $121,000 and change in the current year. It's actually decreasing $1,153. Equipment codes are part of the building allocations, where the principals have X amount of money to spend over supplies, equipment, certain codes. There's $1,100 less being spent in equipment. If there's not a lot of question, there really isn't too much to discuss here on my part. The next section of the budget is what I call the contractual codes. And if you look over here on the top left, if you can see the cursor, these are all 400s. And that's what the 400 in the coding system the state requires are what they call contractual items, where you're basically paying somebody else to do whatever the service is that you need to have done. Some things I'll highlight here, because if you look down the right-hand column, for the most part, it's all zeros, meaning there's no budget increase or decrease for most of these codes. This section is where, we do have expenses for a school resource officer through the the Cheektowaga Police Department. We do have some contractual expenses for our parochial students. We have a number of Maryvale students, in fact, I'd say over 100, I forget the number, probably a couple hundred, that attend parochial schools in other schools, and like that are within Williamsville or Lancaster or Frontier. Those public schools send us an invoice because they're required to provide health services and things towards students in parochial schools, including ours. We spend about just under $108,000 on those expenses every year. We also spend about $356,000 for like OT, PT services, for services, for certain students have those needs. Ultimately, these expenses can help drive aid for high-cost placements and those kinds of things. That's not dollar for dollar, but that is a big expense that's part of this section. The real discussion, I guess, with the change in our contractual codes is transportation. And our fuel costs, and we've jumped the budget from $60,000 to $75,000 for transportation fuel costs. That's a 25% increase, and that was before last week's real spike, this weekend's spike. So we'll continue to monitor this, but the reality is, you know, we're seeing a large increase in rate. The same thing would be for diesel fuel, and it will also depend on where buses are going. If you look at transportation, the next line, let me just highlight it here so you can kind of at least see the line I'm talking about. This is primarily our home to school. If these students that are being transported are going between their house and the Maryvale school buildings. They're not going to a private placement or charter school or anything else. They're truly basically our students coming here. And we have more buses, more mileage that we're putting on. So we didn't go to bid. These are increases based on what our buses are currently doing, plus a CPI factor, because that's what our extension's allowing us to do. And even though the CPI this year is, you know, really trailing or trending to be higher than what it has been, you'll recall when this was bid a few years ago, the end result was significantly higher than this. And that could very well be what I would have expected if we would have chosen to go out to bid. The next big increase here is in regards to transportation for special needs, where you have students going to private placements, even someone like, I'll say a charter school run, or depending on the style of bus or how the timing of when the school opens and how many kids are on the bus, we do look at structuring the routes so that they're the least expensive. But there are times the only way to get a student or two to a charter school is to put them on this more expensive bus. The other thing is this year we have a higher percentage of ridership than what we've had the last couple years. The kids on the bus, we pay. If they don't ride the bus, and there was a lot of students who weren't riding the bus during the pandemic and concerns for that. So we're looking at having higher ridership percentages, and it's a significant budget increase that still drives transportation aid to the district. So
Is that the same with transportation too, or just the special one?
Ridership, primarily on this one. For our home to school students who come to Maryvale, we pay X amount for a big bus. You know, and whether there's 3 kids on it or 50 kids on it, we're paying that same amount. These special need runs, we've broken, I'll basically say Western New York into like 7 zones. And if they're going to a zone that is, you know, in the southern tier, the farthest zone, it's gonna have the highest rate to transport there versus going to Cheektowaga, Amherst, Williamsville area is our main zone. Niagara Falls, you know, is a run that's kind of farther away, but there are some schools closer that fit that zone for us. And that's just how that's structured. But even though these expenses are going up, they do drive transportation aid. So the silver lining is that we will get, I'd say between 55 and 60% of these costs reimbursed the next school year. So those are my comments in regarding those contractual codes. Are there any other questions, comments? The next section, those 400s become 450s, which are the codes we use to distinguish our materials and supplies. And overall, I'm going to scroll to the bottom because our materials and supplies, in our program section of the budget. A little bit quicker, they're going down $3,415. So on a $50 million budget, a $3,000, $1,000 change isn't terribly significant, but again, it's allocation, you know, and where do buildings want, you know, their allocation being spent, and overall materials and supplies are, for all intents and purposes, remaining flat. Other questions on software or materials and supplies? The next section are the 460 codes, which are library materials and computer software. We're budgeting the exact same $68,273 we did last year, or for the current year. These drive state aid to the district. It's dollar for dollar. We spend this money, we're gonna get this money virtually dollar for dollar, maybe within a couple $100. But to the district, but we structure our expense so that we're sure to get the most library materials and computer software aid to the district, because it's based on population and so much per student. So I do try to budget a little bit more than that, just to make sure we get the most that we can. Tuition costs, a few comments here. This 470 section of the budget, you know, if we have resident students placed in foster care, attending, living in a home in Williamsville could invoice the district for services. So we've had about a $25,000 budget line that's just remaining flat, and that'll depend on the needs and that student population. But our charter school students, we have, I think, 6 more students. Yeah, 6 more students in place than what we budgeted for in the current year. So when I look at budgeting, we had in the current year budgeted for 36 students with 5 extra slots. Next year, as it stands right now, we have 42 students. So I'm budgeting for 42 students and those 5 extra slots again, because as we've talked about,
there are folks that have never set foot in a Maryvale building. They move into the district.
That's true.
They remain in the charter school they're in, and now the Maryvale, you know, communities has to pay that bill.
And there's just a lot of fluidity in these students, and the 42 here now may not even be, a lot of them may not have been the same students in the 42 last year. They change a lot. And then private placements. You can see this budget code is going down $147,000. In part, we want to bring kids back to Maryvale, that we talked about, but also there could be movements to the BOCES placement. And if one of our students was placed at Aspire, they would be coded here. But if it turns out that a better placement for them in the next school year or now would be a BOCES placement, we can't pay for that out of this budget line. We have to pay for it on the next page when we get there. So it all depends on where they're at. But overall, this tuition section is down almost $54,000, even though it does include 6 more charter school students.
Kudos to you, Mr.
Here we have textbooks. My comments about textbooks are identical to the library materials and the software. We get virtually dollar for dollar in state aid for this paid back to the district. So we're not increasing this for next year, but we do try to maximize that aid, and that's what should happen for next year at $145,000 and change. The next section, 490s, are where we're required to record BOCES. And a couple comments here, the 2110, that top line, I'll highlight it here, that helps visualize that. This one's going up just under $200,000. This code will go up $100,000 for, I think, maybe 1 more year after this one, because of a P-TECH build program through BOCES, where the district signed on for the incoming freshman class to send 5 incoming freshmen every year to this P-TECH build program through BOCES. Then they're in this program their entire high school year here at Maryvale, plus 2 years at ECC. And at the end of the 6 years, they get an associate's degree at no cost to them. We'll actually get state aid on them when they're freshmen and sophomore in college. Kind of helps offset some of this cost. And then this generates BOCES aid to us the following year as well. So when the whole thing's said and done, 10 years long running this program, we're supposed to have at least broken even with all the different revenues, expenses, even though the timing of it is a little squirrely.
Financially, hopefully, 9 kids get their associate's degree.
That's great.
That's the main thing.
Yeah. The next line is where, again, we have students placed in special education and BOCES placement. And this one is going up about $183,000. This does generate aid, but in this particular BOCES expense, it's a public excess cost aid, not a BOCES aid category. And overall, that section's up about 12%, but again, it drives aid. Some of it's associated with that P-TECH, and that would drive that percentage down. 2 final areas to discuss are just benefits, and really we've talked about these at the last meeting. The ERS budget line is going backwards about $44,000, in part because we've had multiple retirements in the non-certified staff ranks, custodians, clerical, teacher aides, had some retirements, but the state's contribution rate that we're required to pay is also going backwards from, I think it was a 15% number, just escapes me now, to 13.1. So those costs are dropping. New York State teachers' retirement is the employer's share for our certified teaching administrative staff. And actually our contribution rate that's set by the state, the rate itself is going up 12.25%. So with that percentage increase on the rate that the state sets, plus also, salaries are higher, you're taking it on a higher number, that does have an impact for us on this program section of $147,000 and change. Health insurance, you'll see it's another area of the budget, like it is every year, showing increase. We don't know next year's rates yet for our 2 different plans, but as soon as they get finalized, we would expect to, be able to hopefully maybe even adjust this downward a little bit. But health insurance is a tough one to know, and they don't typically tell us, at least with NY44, until maybe early April at best. But that's not uncommon to have. I think this is about a 4.9% increase. And maybe we can get that down unless something else is happening I'm not aware of just yet. Lastly, this final line of the budget is called interfund transfers. And it's basically a code where we have to take dollars and allocate them towards our special aid fund. Expenses associated with our school lunch are charged to our school lunch fund. Expenses associated with our capital projects are paid for out of the capital projects fund, except the mortgage payments and things that are charged here in the general fund. Well, this is one where we have to pay for our UPK expenses. We have teachers, we have aides, we have expenses for our UPK program. We have to record by state law all of those expenses in the federal fund. And then the state, now for at least the 15 years I've been here, has given us $170,000 every year to offset those costs. And we have to record all of that in the federal fund. So this line is what we use, because we have to transfer those expenses from the general fund. We're required to put them here. Summer handicap. we have special education students in a 12-month program. We're responsible for 20% of the July and August expenses. We get 80% back in state aid, but our share, that 20%, needs to be recorded on this line so that it can be paid out of that federal fund. So here, ultimately, we're looking at those expenses, and I think in part, this $108,000 increase, we had not initially planned for UPK to have 3 teachers in it. Our budget was to have 2, and then that population after the pandemic spiked again. You might recall we added that 3rd section in August. This $108,000 in part is because we're now trying to bring that into a budget for that 3rd section in UPK. Overall, where the budget stands today and what we've presented, you're seeing a $50,036,000 budget growing by $2,460,000. That is an increase of about 4.91%. But with offsetting revenues and things we'll get into the next time, I want to confirm that this is a tax cap compliant number for us. And the only if the numbers change, our plan will be, and it's, we fully intend to only propose and ultimately land on a tax cap compliant budget. So at the next meeting, I intend to review revenues and any potential changes that will be happening to the budget between now and then, and just kind of recap it. We'll approve it in April and have it approved by voters in May. Exactly. Are there questions? Thank you.
Good. All right. Moving on to the consent agenda, and that is Dr. London again.
I would recommend that the board approve the financial and non-personnel consent agenda items 1 through 4 as submitted.
Can I get a motion?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I would recommend the board approve the personnel consent agenda and agenda items 1 through 5 as submitted.
Can I get a motion? Motion? Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Thank you.
Moving on to new business.
I'd like to recommend the board approve the 22-23 student calendar as presented.
Motion? I'll make a motion. Second?
Second.
Second. All in favor? Aye.
BOCES election.
There are 3 seats up for the BOCES election this year. Leaving is Andrew, Mary, and Raymond. And in your board packet, you received 3 letters. Eric Borstein is running, Andrew is running to keep his position, and Mark Mecca is running. So you have to motion, you have to vote for 3, we only have 3. But you need to motion to nominate all of them, or 1, 2, 3, or none of them.
Motion to nominate all 3 of them? Second?
Sure. Second.
All in favor? Aye.
All right, moving on, I'd like to recommend the board approve the first reading of the policy update as presented.
Motion. Motion. Second? All in favor? Aye.
Thank you.
I'd like to recommend the board approve the testing RFP award for the fall 2021 capital project as presented.
Motion? I'll make a motion. Second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye.
I'd like to recommend the board approve contract settlement for the assistant superintendent of curriculum and instruction as presented.
Is there a motion?
I'll motion.
Second? All in favor? Aye.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend the board approve the contract settlement for the Director of Special Education representative.
Motion,
I'll motion.
second, all in favor? Aye. Moving on, old business?
All right, I'd like to recommend the board approve the second reading of the policy updates as presented in your agenda.
Motion. Motion second. All in favor? Aye. That's that, all right. Miscellaneous, we'll go to student liaison. Gabby?
Hi guys, it's nice to see everyone's faces and smiles. I enjoyed it a lot. So obviously since the last time I've been here, no masks anymore. It's great. I know a lot of people were scared about being judged whether they were gonna wear a mask or not in school, but it seems like the environment's pretty nice and no one's really attacking people for their choice, which I really like. Recently, there was a spin night at the middle school, and they had some pretty cool things. Babysitting all the little kids who were watching Encanto, and I think I got a song stuck in my head. Yep. And they had like drones flying. I think they were playing. I don't know exactly what they were doing, but there was a lot of great information for the parents. Also, the high school recently had their musical, and that was a great hit, especially my head, hitting the stage. And I'm trying to think of what else.
We've got our high school student culture team meeting this
Yeah,
week,
tomorrow.
our third one.
Yeah, I'm excited for that, and I don't know, it seems like everyone's in good mood lately. Ever since break, everyone's just like in a positive mood, and I feel like everything's fine.
Good job with the performance.
Yeah, you did a
Thank
great
you,
job.
thank you.
You too.
I was, okay, let's just say I was behind stage and I just looked up and there's a yellow hat and the guy wearing a pink mustache, and I'm like, who is that?
It wasn't Super Mario, it was me.
I will say, it did take me a minute, and then I realized it was it.
I'm waiting for my Tony Award, so I'm just saying. No, but you did a great job.
Thank you.
Both hats.
They all did.
Yeah. Thank you.
Great. Moving on, Erie County Association of School Board updates. Any information to share, anybody? No. All right, second, resident input. Any resident input?
No, no
Was
real-
everyone looking at
First of all, I want to thank Superintendent and, of course, the board and the principals for the great job they've done through this very miserable, long pandemic. It was great to be back at school, especially starting September, but Thursday was a special day. I get to see faces. I haven't seen these kids' faces at all. And it's really neat. You can hear them. You know, at my age, you can't hear much. At least I could hear their voices again, and we could start doing some really good teaching, because at least you could pronounce words, and we're doing our sight words and that. They could watch the pronunciation. It's a lot easier. Some of the kids still wearing a mask. God bless them, love them, whatever. But the idea is at least I can see some faces again. As we stand right now, on April 7th, Duco again will start at the Senior Center at 7 o'clock. Diane Bajikowski will do State of the Business for Town of Cheektowaga. However, we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow at the town board meeting, because there is a resolution asking that anybody who uses the town facilities have $1 million liability policy, which will bankrupt us.
Well, I told you before the meeting, I'll say it again publicly, you know, Duke is welcome back at any time to primary.
I appreciate that, and we'll see what happens tomorrow, because after that I go on the board meeting. I don't want to see this happen. But we'll see what happens. I appreciate everything you guys always done. You know, we love being in Maryvale. I know it's not me. But we'll see where that goes. And hopefully, there'll be a new leader at Duco. I'll be the community liaison, hopefully we'll have a new president. Now we just found out that our secretary is gonna quit. So I mean, it's just hard doing anything anymore, because nobody really wants to do much. You know, they're afraid or whatever. They just, we have a very elderly constituents who come to the meetings. But these are the people who vote, these are the people who care. They care enough to find out what's going on in the community. So I'll let you know more on, I just looked, on the 21st here. I'll let you know whatever transpires tomorrow, where we're gonna be at, and I'll be in touch with you guys. So again, I wanna thank you. It's been 7 years since I've been here, and how fast it went. And I'll tell you what, it's been a real blessing. I don't know how many more years I got, but whatever I got left, as long as the Lord gives me strength, I wanna continue to make a difference in these kids' lives. And I'm hoping to get other seniors involved too, which we're starting to. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, adjournment, our next board meeting is Monday, March 21st, here at 6 PM. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Second?